Okay.
Excellent. Well, this is a first because not only is it the first podcast, but it is also the first where it's not even my recorded podcast. It's got to be someone else's. So um, there's certainly a first for everything. But welcome to the Academy podcast, where we discuss and seek a change in long-term athletic development. Uh, my name is Ben Wellenbach, and I'm a dad of two girls, a strength coach, and owner of Be Well Fitness since 2007. Prior to opening the doors in 2007, I was an athlete all my life, and sports were life to me. I loved playing outside with my friends. I would play pickup games. If we got bored or we didn't have equipment for the day, we would make stuff up. Um, Sports still to this day are such a large part of my life and my identity. I see them now as an experience from a whole new vantage point and lens. As a father of two girls and coach myself, I'm both concerned and hopeful where I see things headed. And it is my desire to help educate and shift the way that our current culture operates regarding long-term athletic development. The name Academy reminded me of a school where we learn, we grow, hence the subtitle Building Better Athletes. I wanted this to feel like a cool school that people wanted to attend. I wanted this to be a resources for coaches, for parents, for players, organizations, and communities to benefit from. I want to change the way we see human development for the long-term success of everyone. That starts from the ground up. I thought it would be fun to combine my love of sneakers, especially Nike, really solely Nike, with each guest that I interview. So I will pair, no pun intended, each guest with a sneaker from the Nike collection that best represents them. And today we have the fortunate to have two great guests joining us. No coincidence that both shoes that I have paired up with the two of you gentlemen are basketball shoes. Russell Westbrook was known for his speed and, more importantly, his multi-directional speed. These also look like a great coaching shoe for our guest today, who has pioneered many of the multi-directional speed paths we other coaches run on today. He has been coaching for over 35 years, and because of his love of basketball specifically, this shoe represents the speed, sport, and coaching of this man, Lee Taft. The Russell Westbrook Jordan 1 Take 5 in white, university red, and black is a classic colorway for the class act that Lee is as a person. So how do you find a pair of shoes that best represents a young, strong, talented individual that also has a vast history of martial arts? You, of course, have to go with the Kobe Bruce Lee colorway. And this is for our second guest, Dr. Jason Park. I am very fortunate to have met Jason through our mutual coach, Will Chung, almost 5 years ago, and our past connections and love of performance have brought us close. I am honored to call him a friend and grateful to have him with us today. So I was first exposed to Lee in 2008, way back in 2008, Lee, at Perform Better Summit here in Chicago, where he delivered Rethinking Multi-Directional Speed. And since 1989, Lee has taught foundation movement to our beginning youngsters to help amateur athletes to professional athletes become quicker, faster, stronger. Lee's entire philosophy is based on one of his most notable quotes: learning athletic movement correctly from the start is the foundation for athletic success. So I thank you both for joining me today with your time, your expertise, and mostly your care. So welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's the best introduction start of a podcast I've ever been a part of. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. Thank you.
It is my pleasure. I'm happy to hear that because I put some deep thought into that Nike shoe for you,
Yes,
and
you did.
I hope it suits you well.
It does. Unbelievable. It's great. It's great to be here with you, Jason, as well.
Thank you, Lee. Your work has been fundamental for me from the very beginning. So it's an honor to have you here and to speak together on how to make our athletes better.
I appreciate it. This will be fun.
So I think, Jason and I were talking the other day, and what I said is that, after seeing many of your posts, Lee, especially recently, with your feelings of just youth sports in general today, I think all three of us would clearly agree on, let's say, some of the challenges that we face. I think what I would like to do today is really get an idea from you just of your own background, your own love of sport, and really, tell me about your experience as a youth yourself with sports. I would love to hear from both of you about your own youth sports experience. Where you grow up, what were you into? What did you do as a kid yourself?
Sure. Would you like me to go first, or you want Jason to
Mm.
kick it off?
Lee, go ahead.
You want me to go? Okay, great. Well, thank you. So I grew up in a family of six kids. My three of us, three boys, three girls. My father was a long time coach, athletic director, eventually ended up an administrator. He was involved for about 44 years. He actually was in World War II. He was in charge of all physical education and physical fitness for the military when he was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. So a lot of my background stemmed from hearing those stories. And then I became a phys ed teacher. My two older brothers, much older, they both were teachers and coaches and actually got into the administrative realm as well, but for like 35 years. So I grew up in that environment. Played every sport I could, played four sports in high school: football, basketball, track, tennis. Played baseball when I was younger. Of course, we kicked around. I'm from the Northeast, up above, yeah, above Albany, kind of up in that area. And we played hockey in the parks and in the wintertime. We just did all that kind of stuff. I was fortunate enough to play two sports in college. I played tennis and I played basketball for 4 years. I believe I know I could have played four sports in college if I chose, just because of my background growing up as a multidisciplinarian kid. Did everything, learned it all. My father was huge in gymnastics, so our phys ed program was centered a lot around gymnastics. Used to have gymnastic shows. I could do pretty much any stunt that you could name in gymnastics when I was in like fourth grade. We just grew up in it, so that gave me such a foundation of athleticism. And we use the phrase functional, but kind of like a functional strength. I could stabilize my body in so many positions that allowed me to advance. And what was great about that time frame, growing up in the 70s and early 80s, was everything was free. We just played. We entered games. When our summer leagues for any of our sports, especially basketball, we didn't even get coached. Our coach would enter us into a league, and then you would get yourself there. We'd all pile into a car and show up and sub ourselves in and out, and the officials took care of everything else, but most teams didn't have coaches there. And I think that's a large part of why we advanced knowledgeably in the game, and we just didn't have it. And so, kind of fast forward, I became a phys ed teacher. Became a coach, and then obviously got into sports performance to try to make a big difference. And, to a degree, I think we've made huge strides, but I'm also very disappointed and disheartened with how we've taken the role of youth athletics away from the youth. And we've made it an adult-driven agenda. And I think very, very poor leadership across the board from a nationally led youth-driven program. Even though we try to make it look good, with fun ads and fun advertisement and commercials and all. It's very poorly led, simply because we don't have people that understand development and learning, but they understand how to make money. And once that happened, all bets were off. And that's what I try to fight now. And I understand there has to be payments made, insurance, things like that. But the direction it's gone has really taken away not just the essence of youth sports, but it took away the development of youth sports, because true development you can't make money on if you do it right. All right. If we do it incorrectly, we make money off it. And I think there's got to be a better direction. Now, we enter into the field, what we do. I've owned speed academies since the early 90s, and all of us have training. That allows parents and athletes who want to go to the next level an opportunity. But to go play basketball, baseball, soccer, volleyball, tennis, whatever, and I have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to play free sports, that's where we've gone wrong. Now the agenda changes. Now development changes based on the agenda. So that's kind of my opening statement there. I'm very frustrated for years on this, and I've become very vocal over the last few years, and that was the only way I could get people to talk. Because when I first did it, I was very quiet, just kind of saying, and then people said, yeah, that's cute, Lee, keep doing your little agenda. And then when I started pissing people off and calling people out, now people listen to me, and I've had many organizations actually change how they do things because they get what I'm talking about, how it's destroyed the family unit, and then therefore the kids end up not benefiting. So.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a few follow-up questions on that, but I'll introduce my perspective a little bit first, and then we'll start the discussion.
Yeah.
Because even from the very beginning, I think for myself, I went the other direction. I wanted to play basketball, baseball, soccer, but growing up as an only child without older brothers or sisters, and parents who are Korean American immigrants, they were not aware of all of the sporting cultures and how to support a young athlete. My father was very gracious, though. He, as a Korean parent would, started me off in golf when I was very young at 6. So that gave me one sport. And then combat sports, Taekwondo gave me another one, because both of them are solo and skill driven.
Yeah.
But I won't lie, when elementary school, middle school, I always wanted to play basketball, soccer. And one of the big things was, if you're not good at the beginning, sometimes you don't get playing time. And if you don't get practice with your parent or another coach outside, my parents didn't know how to guide me through it. So I almost developed in martial arts and golf outside. And then at the age of 15, when all my older friends left for college, I went to go for a harder sport, and I went to do boxing and Muay Thai. And all of these were individual. I had a really strong amateur career, got to compete in over 20 competitions, was very lucky with great strength and conditioning coaches that taught me a lot of the athletic qualities that these combat sports won't teach on their own: how to sprint, how to lift, how to jump on one leg or 2 legs, which we're going to touch on later. But my whole exposure to high school and college athletes wasn't until I went through sports residency after I graduated from my doctorate in physical therapy, and I was in the training room, right? Because I was in a sports residency, and I looked, I was like, oh, these guys are not the elite athletes I thought they were. Because in my mind, because I'm developing outside of that whole system, I'm in a silo. I thought everyone was an elite athlete, and I was not an athletic guy. I was just good at my skill. But the ironic thing is being in that silo, being solo driven and outcomes, you have to win the fight. You have to hit that golf ball a certain distance. There is no teammate to be able to rely on. It really allowed me to develop in a different way. And now when I look back and see other high school and college athletes, I'm like, they're underdeveloped. They're not prepared. And this is something that, in my work, I always focus on professional sports because I didn't want to deal with parents and all this drama and politics. But what we always hear in professional sports is we wish someone in the previous category for the athlete would have prepared them better for professional sports. So if NBA, they wish college would have prepared them better. The college coaches would say, we wish the high school coach would prepare them better, right? And so on, all the way down to T-ball. So I am now very driven because you hear of professional athletes and college athletes getting multiple ACL surgeries, multiple times that they're shut down from Auschwitz slaughters or patella tendonitis. And it's very sad to hear because, professional sports, you get 20 years hypothetically, but for a high school athlete, you might only have 2 to 4 years. So to be out for a year and a half, it's devastating. And they may never get their way back. So I'll leave it there in that, we both came from completely different yin and yang ways to get here, but the answer is the same. We need to focus on development, focus on ways to get better as an athlete. So that way, there's no barrier to entry to their potential.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think both of you brought up some really interesting points I'm going to touch on a little bit later. But I'm curious to actually, because you both mentioned parents. I'm curious to know what roles did your parents play in your, let's say, development in general? You could be specific to sports, but just in general. And the reason I ask is because I think everybody plays a role in this challenge that we face in long-term athletic development, because the parents, um, they are fighting for more tournaments. They're fighting for more exposure. They're fighting for um, higher level teams because more is better. They are just as much of a part as, let's say, an unexperienced coach that would do damage to their team. So I know for me, what my parents did for me, for my own development. I'm curious to know, Lee, with your dad having his background. I'd also be very curious to know what your mom was like during this, because my mom, I grew up playing hockey. Like, hockey was what I played through college. And you know I don't know if you've, obviously, I think being in the Northeast, you would see it, but the first time I blew a snot rocket on the bench, I thought could hear my mother from across the rink yell at me that I didn't use a tissue. Uh, so I'm just like, I'm always curious to know the balance that the parents bring.
Yeah, it was cool. And I think part of the reason I struggle with today's approach so much is my parents were as hands off as they could possibly be. The environment in my household, because we all loved athletics, was certainly shaped um, by my dad's influence and all, but other than, he was the athletic director at the high school that I went, so he was always there, but didn't coach me. That was somebody else's job. If I was ever lazy in a game, he'd let me know about that, but didn't interfere otherwise. Ask questions, he asked me questions, how'd you do and how many points and how'd you feel, whatever. Um, and my mom was just, Lee, glad to see you play. I hope you had fun, But she was the same way. She goes, if I ever had a bad attitude or if I ever did something, and they would let me know that. So their approach to me was very much, it's your time. We had our time, and I've always said that to my kids. All three of my children played for me, and it was all out of choice. They didn't have to, because I was actually at a different school, and my daughters both wanted to transfer to that school so they could play for me because they know my approach. I'm not. Most dads or moms say, "Oh, I can never coach my kid." I'm like, that's a shame. That's a shame because it's an opportunity you miss. My kids love playing for me because I don't yell and scream at them. I give them a lot of opportunities to fail, and my parents did the same. And so, because of that, I was fearless. I wasn't afraid. My dad, again, it came down to, he would help me. Guy was an unbelievable coach, one of the most successful coaches in the state of New York through years of all the sports that he coached. But he could have, he would help me in the backyard with things if I asked, but if I didn't, he was busy. By the time I was in high school, he was my principal. And so he was a busy guy, and he was the AD at the same time. So you can imagine his workload. So, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I was glad because he was always there to support me, but he never butted in. He let me be coached by other coaches. And even when I got to college, he went to events that he could. I was far enough away where they couldn't come to everything. And so my experience as a kid has shaped me now. I'm like, my kids, even though they played for me, I'm like, listen, this is your time. My responsibility is to the team. You're on my team. But other than that, I'm not going to, force it down your throat. I think that's a big mistake we make. And kind of to your comment, Ben, with like how parents get involved, the problem is the parents, even though they won't admit it, it's about them. Because if it's not about them, then they don't get as involved unless they have to. And like I've helped start youth programs because the kids didn't have anything. So I helped start a program to get it just so they had things. And then from that point, let it be organic and have some fun with it. But parents, even though they say it's not, it is, because they get so angry and they get so invested, and they search for that college scholarship for their child. So the child now feels pressure. Never had that. I didn't even think about college until the spring of my senior year. I got an offer by a college coach, a college coach. And you guys might, probably know who it is. Stan Van Gundy was a young coach. He's still an analyst now. He was about 25 years old, and he's the one that recruited me to a small college up in the Northeast. And I had no interest at the time. I was just playing high school sports. And then it happened. Now kids are in sixth grade, in their head, they're being told, you got to get a scholarship. That's the worst thing that could have happened. Worst thing that could have happened. So, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. For me, I look at it with my mother was always supportive, but really didn't have anything more to give than, I hope you do well, because that was not her world. She was an artist, painter, so like athletics was not her world. And my father, I think, instilled three things. One, just watching how he worked, in his professional vocation as a CPA, but also how he played golf, was just understanding work ethic, right? He would go to the range, but also just seeing him work, 12 hours a day. And like, he was a machine. He still is a machine. At 79, I say that he's still outworking me as a professional, and that's something I saw from a very young age. But even when he made time for the little time that he had for golf, it was always practice with putting, chipping, at the range. And then after the golf game, reassess and then go back through that, even if it's just like a few balls for each. But he was always reattaching himself to the practice. I think the other gift he gave me was he gave me 3 coaches over the time. I'm not sure at what age and what length, but one was at a range, one was at another range, and the last one was in a strip mall where there was just a net and a mat. And I think the exposure of 3 different approaches, but the one that I developed the most was the small room, dimly lit, with a net and a mat. And I think back to it, and I talked to my athletes about it. I was like, one, it took away the outcome. And that's really important. One, it doesn't matter how it hit, it's the sound of the ball and how the swing felt.
Yeah.
The second thing was it shaved off time because I can't look at the ball and where is it going to land. I'm already on the next rep, right? So I think that exposure to 3 different approaches, which I was grateful to have, and seeing that the one that actually is the lowest of tech was the most beneficial for me and the most kind of systems approach, as well as bodily awareness, hearing the sound of the ball. And now as I learned as a young strength and conditioning coach, seeing say like the Russian strength and conditioning and sports performance programs, you hear the same things. The best tennis players in the world wasn't playing on a court, but they were just hitting balls against the wall, right? And I think that speaks to a lot of the availability of good training, right? Lee, your stuff, being that it's just body weight, but having very key things. I even just spoke last week at our ACL course, and I just showed it in a simple way to show how one addition can make such a huge impact. Because we're talking about change of direction. I said, are you guys familiar with the lunge matrix? Front lunge, rear lunge, lateral lunge to lateral lunge, or lateral lunge to a curtsy lunge. I said, it is the best and the worst thing for change of direction. It's the best because it teaches you everything from the waist down of what to do if you do it correctly, but nothing about torso control and directionality. And that's when I segue to the roll and reach, because that is as low tech. All you need is a medicine ball or some basketball, depending on the depth you want to work on, a Swiss ball. It's available everywhere, but you can work directionality and starting to move that torso and that line. And it's all based on, are you aware that what each exercise can provide? All you add a ball to it, and then now it is a formal tool for change of direction, where the lunge matrix, which is readily available, is so close, but that last 2% is missing everything.
Yeah. Yep. That's awesome.
You both mentioned your practice. So whether that was, the golf that you just spoke about in the most, basic and low tech way of a mat and a net. What I have found these days is, and this could be the age of technology with kids. It could be the parents that have the bigger agenda than the kids do. Do you find that kids are not practicing for the love of practice? And in other words, do you find that they're not practicing to develop, they're practicing because they do want to see that figurative ball flight that you're talking about, that was basically taken away? They want they want the end result as opposed to the actual process.
Yeah, I mean, I think like watching NBA guys practice to hit 3-pointers now, it's really amazing because it really speaks to that. They don't start by just shooting 3-pointers. They start close to the basket without the jump, just the arc of the ball. Then they step back into to the 3-point line. And I think that's the biggest, right? Whatever sport you're doing, it's having a systematic approach that builds the skill and having that practice that leads to the outcome. And I think you see that with every high school coach. I remember seeing our high school coach teach football, and I was like, they're practicing 12 different plays and they suck at all of them. And if they probably learn just two, like a passing play and a throw play, like, or like a running play and a passing play, they probably would win a lot more games. I think, and that's because of the influence of watching, they're amateur coaches, right? Because usually they're at the younger level, they're either teachers, parents, someone who volunteers for that spot, or someone who is not all in on one sport. And then they're watching like NCAA Division I or professional games, and that doesn't apply to their population right there. And I'm sure parents also play a part because they want them to do the things that they see at the level that they want their kid to be at.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% on that. It's, I think there's a level when we throw around the word play. And I think over the years, it's changed its meaning. Because when I was a kid, play was what we did when we walked out the back door. Okay, we instantly, now we have to formulate play for kids. Because that's all they know. Many of the parents now grew up in this same travel sport, scheduled practices environment. So that's all they know. It's not their fault. That's what they grew up in. I was very fortunate in my friends. We didn't have that. Our parents would like, get out of the house, stop sitting around. And so we're out until it's lunchtime. And then you come back and you go out till dinner time. And then you go till the lights turn off in the park and you come home. And so we were very, very creative. And I think an area where, and Jason certainly, the level of athlete he's been around, obviously today's athlete, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. But I think in many cases across the board, I don't know that they've developed the same kinesthetic and decision-making abilities that athletes of my time had to, simply because we didn't have sports performance. We just went out and played. Decision-making was the most important thing for us, or what I like to say, reading. So reading what's about to happen. So we start talking about predictive models and perceptive models of movement. Well, because parents instantly today get kids right in a structured program, that part of development is diminished. And I think that's where we see, and, there's a lot of, different opinions on this, but I think a large part of our injury, aside from overuse, is we just don't make free decisions and early decisions as well. We're a little bit delayed and late, and often we become unstable. But because we've created so much force in these athletes, now we're stronger and bigger. Well, that force tends to create an injury at the site of instability. And we didn't have that. I was not the biggest, strongest athlete, but I could pretty much do any skill you asked me to do. I could do a double back flip because I learned it as a gymnast, as a young kid. I could cut, I could jump, I could do all this. And I did do some basic weightlifting, but a lot of it was body weight. But I had so much awareness of my body, and it was not super structured. That was the big thing. And I understand it. I've run a speed academy for 30 years, and I've trained athletes. So I see the importance of it. But a lot of my training is very random at times and very organic, because I'm trying to give them more options than just a very structured option that is predicated by some kind of signal. That's not what I want. I want them to read, then make decisions.
That's really interesting, because I think I obviously agree with all those points about, play being able to create better predictive models, anticipation, reading. But for me, the rigidity of my strength coaches when I was young, right? As a young, like at the age of 18 to 25. So it's a little bit different time frame. But I was so thankful for them because they created a great structure for me to um, learn how to have athletic qualities, right? And it's a different age, I know,
Yeah.
but also I think because they gave me the line so clearly, but then also said at the end of the day, you're not doing any of this stuff for your boxing competition. You have to be able to perform there. So play there. Here is rigid, right? So I think I had that benefit. I tell all my athletes now, it's like we are creating really tough lines to draw within, so that way I can let you be the artist that you want to be later. So you can break the rules later if you learn these very rigid ways. But hearing from athletes who play ball sports, like I think soccer is one of the biggest conundrums for me because everyone says that we don't have enough support for soccer in the United States. And I go, no, that's the first sport everyone plays. You play all the way to a college scholarship. Why are we not developing better football or college, like, soccer athletes, football for international
Yeah.
fans?
Yeah.
And, every time I have an international player or like a US player, I'm looking and asking them what's their background. And what I see, regardless of socioeconomic level, when they're from Mexico, South America, Europe, there is that level of play. They all grow up playing, not only on the field in structured play, but like pick up soccer games. They mentioned it like, yeah, hitting on a asphalt with little dips, curbs, benches, seeing where that ball will bounce off and being able to anticipate that
Right.
really allowed them to have the play that in the US they see they only play on the field. And I thought that was really interesting, and it really makes me think about the basketball athletes that really enjoy pickup. They're obviously the best at one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
ISO ball. But there's so many basketball players that almost didn't anticipate to be in basketball, yet they develop so quickly when they get their growth spurt, right? You hear this all the time. They're in football or track because they're 6'2", and then they shoot up to 6'7", 6'8", and then they become a monster in basketball. And so it's not, the skill gap can be closed very quickly. I think, to your point, Ben, coaches and parents get in the way. And that's why my perspective with talking to parents, I'm like, I'm not the one to say your kid most likely will not make it, even though it's reality is true. So don't push them hard. But the way you guys act, you might push them out too early, or you might stop them from ever achieving the professional ambitions that they might have because you're getting in the way
That's
of
right.
their development.
Absolutely.
So it's
100%.
like both ends. It's funny. It's a conundrum like that.
Yeah.
I've faced this conundrum on a daily and weekly basis because my daughters are 13 and 14 years old, and we've never pushed them into a sport. We've always kind of done the spaghetti on the wall. Whatever sticks, whatever they love, whatever they gravitate to, that's where they will go until maybe they change their mind and they want to do something else. Um, I think the conundrum for me is, you know, how do we get this sense of play, but also some development uh, of, let's say, something that let's call it structured development. In other words, both my daughters are currently playing volleyball. Um, my oldest daughter has taught herself many of the skills. I give her so much credit for that, and much of her success currently is because the fact that she has done that own self exploration. I also have frustration because we're in a situation where, if I look back on her volleyball season, or both of their volleyball seasons, they probably have more time on the actual competition court than they do on the practice court. So when they're on the practice court, are they saying, okay, this is what happened during serve receive, this is what happened during your serve, if you're spiking the ball, if you're digging the ball, pass it, whatever the skill is, this is where I think these coaches, in my opinion, they almost don't know what they don't know. And, there's this structured development with play. And, how do we bring that potentially together?
Yeah, well, first of all, we cannot deny we have to teach. There has to be learning that takes place. Every sport I played, coaches taught us what to do. They taught us the stance. They taught us the execution of the play. That should never not occur. But what happens is we have kids that go now today. They go from a school sport to a travel sport to another travel sport, and they actually never get the opportunity to self-express and go to a park or go to an open gym. And let's say your volleyball coach has a day where they just open the gym, they throw the volleyballs out and say, girls, go to work. I'm going to be in my office. Do what you want to do. Let them play. Let them experience it a little bit, because ingenuity, great playmaking occurs when they are not afraid to make a mistake. But because everything they do is so structured now, they really never get a chance to self-express and to make great plays. So in our, like my speed academy, those kids learn. We teach the heck out of them on how to do things, but we don't teach them until they make mistakes. Once they make mistakes, we self-summarize or have a lot of questions like, why do you think that happened? And they're like, well, I don't know if I, planted my foot right or whatever. I said, well, did it feel like that? They're like, yeah, it kind of did. I said, let's try it again. Let's go. I know what they did wrong, but if I tell them, it becomes a rote memory versus them actually digging deep, just like they would if they're playing in the backyards with their friends who keeps tackling them when they're playing backyard tackle football. If you don't figure it out, you're going to keep getting tackled. So you got to figure out how to move your feet or hit the tennis ball or, play volleyball or basketball, whatever. At some point, we have to involve decision making. We are so structured today. The minute a kid makes a mistake, we interlude with a long dissertation of what they did wrong. Within 5 seconds, that kid's tunes you out, and they're not even listening anymore. And if they are, they're not understanding because it's too much information. And that's the way I used to teach phys ed. I would introduce a unit, we would start playing in day one, and then I'd start teaching the rules while we were playing because it gave them context. So our problem today is everything they do is structured and they just don't get enough chance to play. Now, people will say, well, they don't go to the parks anymore. It's not safe. Fine. Open a gym up or go to the park with them and give them 15, 20 minutes just to be kids and play. Bring a Frisbee. Let them play ultimate Frisbee and figure things out. How do I score in ultimate Frisbee? How do I catch this thing? Well, if you do it enough, you'll figure it out. And so it's that type of stuff in today's world that we have to interject, as where you didn't have to in my world. Everything was play during my time, and very little did we actually get in a gym and get coached. Or, you had football seasons were really short. Basketball wasn't as long. We played 18 games, maybe 20 games, we were done. Now, high school teams are playing 28, 30 games. And then they go right to AAU. And so they never get this self-expressed period of time to be able to develop their game. So you don't not want to have instruction. You just have to have the other part if we want to reach our truest potential.
Mhm.
That's really interesting, Lee. Like, you know, one of the big things I wonder, because I've seen this both like in all different types of sports where if the avenue of like say the high school gym is open, right, for open play, but kids are so the culture, I don't want to say it's this generation, right? Because I think so much is blamed on social media in this generation. I really think of it as what you just brought up so well, like rote memorization, and like if there's no structure, the kids don't feel confident enough to actually
Yeah.
practice and express. I look at now with looking back at say boxing training, you know, one thing I tell our athletes is, you know, in the time of Muhammad Ali before the 80s, training was you run, you jump rope, you shadow box, you hit the bag, you do calisthenics, and you spar. So the coach only has like a teaching element in all of that, and a lot of like, go do it, I'll be back later.
Yeah.
With the rise of pad work or mitt work, right, where they're holding the mitts and guiding them, oh, hit
Right.
here, hit here. That's started in the 80s, and I think it's one of the most important skill sets. Obviously, it helped me a lot in my career, both as an athlete, but also teaching it now as a coach. But I find that everyone's focused on just that element. I want to hold someone hold pads for me and they hit. And I look back at what you were saying about the self-expression, the lonely hours where you're just practicing by yourself
Yeah.
in the dimly lit room, whether you're shadowboxing or Kobe is hitting the basketball, you know, when he's not going to parties. That's where true expression and true desire really comes out. So how do we encourage that now in this new context that we're in? Because I find kids don't have the element where they just want to go out and play.
Yeah. So I love this question, and I've had this question asked to me a lot. So we do have to teach them how to do it because it wasn't natural for them. Because we don't, even with our kids, my children, we don't say, hey, just go out and walk town because it's crazy around where we live. You know, you'd never know what's going to happen to your child. There's too many
Right.
nutcases out there. But so where I'm at right now, where this is my garage, you can't see it very well because it's a little dark. But my son comes out here pretty much every night, brings his basketball. Right behind me, we have a TV. He'll put ESPN on, and he just dribbles for like a half hour. And he tries different things. I only peek my head out to say, you know, how you doing, or hey, are you hungry? You want me to start with something now? And otherwise, he just plays it. He'll come in, he'll tell me, yeah, I got working on this move I saw Chris Paul do, and I worked on that. You know, or I did Kyrie's, or I did, you know, this move or whatever. But it's all on him. He does it himself. I'm in my other room and doing my own stuff, and my wife's doing her thing. And he has gone from an average ball handler to a high level ball handler because he tries things. He gets really crazy with some of the stuff he's doing, and he's developing hand placements that there's no other way to develop it but to have self-expression and just try it. I can't put cones down and say dribble through the cones and very predictable, and that he's doing all the stuff on his own. And I try to get a lot of my other players to do that stuff. Some will do a little bit, but they don't want to. Brennan, because he's heard me so much talk and instruct other athletes that I train here in my garage, he hears it, he gets it, he understands it. He goes, if I'm going to be good, it's up to me, not my dad or not my assistant coach or not my other team. If I want to be good, I got to figure out this problem of having a defender aggressively guard me. How do I handle the ball? And he's only a sophomore. Well, he's going to be a sophomore, a freshman, but he's figured it out now. He knows what he has to do to kind of challenge himself. And he's not a superstar at all by any means, but he's improved so much because of self-discovery with zero coaching from me unless he asks me. If he says, Dad, I can't figure out how to do this move. And then I'll say, well, try it like this, see if that works. And then I'll leave and he'll say, yeah, that was it. That was what I needed to do. And then we let it go. And I did the same exact thing with my two daughters who both ended up playing college basketball, small college, and just a lot of self-expression and figure out how to play the game. So I think we have to give that environment to them and let them go. And I'll give one more example and I'll stop talking is before my practice, we call it 5 minutes of vitamins. And vitamins is a term that's used in basketball where you do individual skills that you want. So I just simply give the guys 5 minutes and I'll put them in a circle at the beginning before I start this process. And I'll say, Peyton, what do you need to work on? What's your weakest thing? He goes, I feel like my left hand's not real strong. Okay, do what you want, left-handed. Jordan, what do you need? My pull-up jumper. Work on something with a pull-up jumper. 5 minutes, I got 18 kids working on those own things. And then we stop, then we stretch. Then we do our rollers and our mobility. But to start the day, they're creative on their own, working on what they know they're not very good at. And that's how we start our day. And I only help them if they ask. If they don't, nope, it's your time. You figure it out. If you need help, I'll help you.
So you have them self-identify where they have lack, right? A gap.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
to do their own gaps analysis. And
Yep.
then you give them the freedom to play before you even do warm-ups.
Yep. We just
I
go
love
from there.
that.
Yeah, and let them
You
go.
know-
And I put up on the
Yeah.
wall the other day, I put up 6 buckets, just empty buckets, right? And I told him, I said, what if you're going to fill these, what are you going to fill them with? Like, think of your skills, speed, strength, shooting, passing, defending, which ones? And I said, you don't have to tell me, but just think about it. And I could see him. And one kid kept saying, he goes, oh yeah. He goes, my bucket is completely empty on this one. They didn't tell me what it was, but they went out and they did it themselves. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I have one quick question on that. So to add on this, you talk about so much like unstructured play, free expression. How do you find, because I know that the speed academies you run and then the information you provide is so good because it's so well structured and defined. Like, 7 fundamental patterns, roll and reach, how you change direction. How do you integrate that without restricting their freedom, right? Because I think that's the duality that parents don't understand, the system and the art of how to have really strong structure and accountability rules,
Right.
but still have free expression. They're like stuck in the middle. They don't do one or the other.
Right. Yeah. So we have models of movement. Everything we do has a model. And I make sure the kids understand the model, but everybody's model has variation. So what we do is we'll once they warm up and we go through and we start instructing, how to accelerate, we'll show them. Then I put them immediately into some kind of chase game or escaping space activity where they got to get away from a team or a partner and they got to negotiate something. And I teach based on that because that's their truest form of movement. Just like me breaking down a video of the LA Lakers and looking at Austin Reeves' footwork on a particular play. Well, I saw him do it live because while he's playing basketball, he's not thinking of his footwork. So that's my truest form. So once I instruct a skill or a lateral shuffle, one of my 7 patterns, I make sure they understand the model, then I let them play. Then I let them do stuff. That's my chance to give the greatest amount of context I can because they just did it in a competitive environment and they showed me their cards. They laid their cards on the table because they were trying to compete. And at the end of the day, unless they're a fitness client trying to lose weight, gain muscle, if they're a competitive athlete, I got to get them competing. So they show me their cards. And now my model can be introduced by dripping it on them rather than forcing it down their throat because they keep showing me every day. And then every week they get better and better. And I don't have to say anything. I'm like, thumbs up, great job.
Wow, that's amazing. We can go on for like 3-4 hours on that just alone. Because that's an aspect that I wouldn't have expected that as your answer, even through exposure of everything that you have provided. I know you talk about games, but that switching to a competitive aspect and then using that as the context to teach, that's platinum. I love that.
That's the reactive tier system. That's when you hear me talking. So if you look at my model, the top 2 things are the 7 patterns in the 180 series. Then we introduce change of direction and then the reactive tier system. That's how it fits. And then it goes down to the correctives. That's the model.
Wow. We're going to talk a lot about this, Lee. I have more to learn from you. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's excellent. Okay, so quick, we'll see how well this works from a time standpoint. In the coaching group that Jason and I belong to, our coach Will Chung has come up with this phrase: rant, rave, resolution. And we seem to, in the context of long-term athletic development, especially with the state of youth sports today, and the access to social media, we tend to get stuck in a rant phase, where it's very easy for parents, players, coaches, organizations to rant about a problem. So I wanted to give each of you kind of rapid fire of what you want to rant about. And we kind of alluded to a little bit of that before, about the state of youth sports and long-term athletic development, what you would rave about. So what are you excited about? What are you hopeful about? What do you love about it? And then maybe one actionable or proposed step that if a player, a parent, a coach, leader of an organization, a school is listening to this, they can take as a nugget and say, I, I think I can implement that to at least start moving the needle in a better direction.
Love it. Do you want me to go, Jason, or you want to kick it off?
You go ahead first, Lee.
Okay. So, in terms of youth sports, the direction it's going with, we've already spoken on travel sports. The big rant I have is not understanding the effect that it has on not just kids, but the family dynamic. And I've been very vocal on this intentionally because I want people to wake up and at least listen. And not everybody has a bad environment. So when I speak about this stuff, I do know there are pockets of people that do it right. They have one-day tournaments. They play no more than 2 games in a day. They go home and rest. They allow their kids to say, hey, my friends are having a sleepover. They're like, okay, never mind. Don't worry about this weekend. Just go play with your friends, rather than forcing them into the car and have to play. I think we've changed youth sports into basically a job for young kids, and kids don't understand jobs yet. They don't understand the meaning of them, other than it gives them a little pocket change every now and again. They don't understand what the real meaning of this hardcore commitment. Youth sports, we want to be committed to working at getting better, but we don't want to have to make such a commitment. It changes our youth outlook and our social dynamic within a group, and our mental health and our families dynamic, and my parents' financial need. We don't want that. So that's my rant. And believe me, I could go on for days with this one. But what I do like is that people are trying to give kids an opportunity to reach higher levels of achievement. And that's never a bad thing. It's just the wrong people are doing it. The kids aren't the one that always are doing it, because I've had many kids that once they hit their senior year, they quit and never play again. They're done, because now they have power over mom and dad because they're now graduated. But when they're in school, and I personally have had kids that have done that, and I tried to warn the parents, and they're like, son of a gun, it's too late now. But I love what it's trying to do. It's just we don't have any leadership right now. We're not directing it correctly. And my advice that I would give to resolve these problems is not to say I have the only answer, but it's worked for me in the state of Indiana when I took over 2 different programs. And now that I'm here in Florida, we've done it. I went to my parents and I said, trust me, please, don't play travel sports. Stay away, follow my system. And my system is we play a lot, but I do everything on a scrimmage-based format. So if Jason is a head coach of a local high school, I call him, hey, Jason, bring your team over. Come on. No money. No, you don't have to pay. Just come on over. I got a 2-hour block in my gym or my field. We're just going to play and we're going to scrimmage. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to start out half court, and you run 10 offensive plays, and I'll play defense, and I'll teach my kids if they get beat backdoor, and you rerun the play. And then we're going to scrimmage full court for a while, and then we're going to go 30-second games. You're up by 3, my ball. you don't have any timeouts and you're in the bonus. What are you going to do? And then we switch the dynamics. We do it again. I started doing that with area teams, and I've had coaches say, well, why the heck are we doing AAU when we can do this? And so I do that with about 10, 12, 15 teams. Parents love it. They don't have to pay to get in. They get to watch great play. One team, we actually cooked for them, and we ate as two different teams. We sat down and ate together and got to know their community. We played 3-on-3. I did a 3-on-3 league tournaments, and it was unbelievable the fanfare we got from parents who watched and the kids who played in it. It was amazing, fast, fun game, and the kids got to learn new skills. And now my parents are like, why the heck did we ever do AAU? We spent all that money and we got nothing out of it. So in an entire year, our parents pay $150 total, and that's only to cover insurance for individuals and for our officials and for our renting the gym, and that's it. And our team has probably progressed past all, even though we're a small team, better than most around here because our kids are highly rested, but when they compete hard and they learn a lot, and then they go home and they hang out with their friends.
Awesome.
Wow,
That's great.
that's amazing. That's amazing. You know, I think my rant is, you know, my specialty as a physical therapist was early on and still is around ACL reconstructions. You know, I do a lot of shoulder, Tommy Johns, as well as Achilles, and Tommy Johns is another one, right? It's very similar. But when I see high school athletes, and I bring up ACLs because, you know, even in high school, you'll have situations where female and male athletes from multiple sports will have 2 to 3 surgeries. And I was like, that is devastating, you know. And one, you can point to the pressures from the parents, or the coach is pushing them, or not preparing them. Whatever the reason, it's a bad situation, and it puts them out not only for that year to recover, but also, you know, now you have fear, avoidance, complications, and then you have a second and a third. It's a real big problem. And I think that goes to my rave, which is there are so many more resources now than ever, right? Yes, we're pushing these younger athletes more, but their resources are there everywhere. And, you know, one of my mentors, you know, pushed really early with the PEP program here in Santa Monica, and then it led to the FIFA program for ACL prevention. And the tough thing I see, I mean, the rave is that it's there. The resolution needs is how do we systematize and have people actually connect to these things and actually own it? Because I think when I saw the PEP program, now the FIFA, you know, they look at it as a hindrance. It takes time out of their practice. They don't have enough time, or they don't see the value. And I think all of us here can understand when someone jumps on 2 legs or 1 leg and they can't even, one, control it, but two, even do it without any fear. Well, that's a real problem.
Sure is.
And so I go, how did we miss such a fundamental thing that is so important for the sport, and it's still not being addressed even to the college or the pro level? So I think that's the big thing that I think the resolution is, how do we as coaches feel empowered to connect and share at all levels of cost, as well as all levels of access, right? Because we could teach it in a seminar for free, or we could teach it one-on-one and it's very expensive, but the information is generally the same, right? And that's not to discount any of these things. It's just different ways to reach it. And I think also for us as coaches to come together and figure out the common principles that we all share, even though we are trying to sell a product. I think now, because the ecosystem is so big, people are trying to sell their product, their version. And I always try to point back, they're just good at teaching a version of this, but you have to jump on 1 leg, you have to be able to run, sprint. That's why I love the 7 fundamental patterns, because it's unavoidable. So I think that's the resolution, is how do we connect and share that information clearly?
Awesome.
Well, I think if, you know, we look back on this shared time together, hopefully, if you're a parent listening, you can take some nuggets of information. If you're a coach, you can certainly take a close look at how you're coaching, how you can make a better impact. Because quite frankly, one of the questions that I didn't get to, but it almost is an obvious answer, is that I think all of us who have played sports have had a very impactful coach in our lives. And the reasons that they're impactful is not because they taught us the best jump shot or, how to skate faster. It was always creating this culture and environment for us to develop. Um, and I think that if people can get some of these nuggets, we will continue to build on that. So for Lee, I know you're on some social media. You also have leetaft.com, and for those listening, it is an excellent resource for comprehensive programs for kids, for coaches. There's YouTube videos as well. So I highly suggest that you seek out that information, because as you said, Jason, the information in your rave is so readily available. So if we do want to truly be better for the next generation, we have resources out there for it. And
And I'll say
Jason,
this with Lee, he is so passionate to teach. I remember one of the times we got to reconnect, I watched you a lot and perform better when I was a young coach. But, when we first got to meet in person was actually during COVID, when
Yeah,
Dr. Ryan Chow connected us.
yeah,
And we were supposed to come to your place, but actually, because of COVID, we actually met on Zoom. And
yeah.
that was one of the most impactful 2 days. It was chock full. We were so tired just sitting in front of our computer watching and practicing. And it really shows that there is no limit, because your passion is unparalleled.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I appreciate this opportunity. And I just want to throw one more thing in there, and hopefully for your listeners, Ben, is whether we're talking about the therapy or the recovery from an injury that Jason is unbelievable at, or an athlete learning a new skill, maybe the patterns, 7 patterns or whatever. We have to become a better coach or a better teacher. You have to become better at understanding learning, and you got to understand learning is ugly. When a client first comes off surgery, it looks ugly. It's
Mm-hmm.
unstable, it's uncoordinated, it's unbalanced, it's wobbly, it's everything until it becomes organized. Well, learning a skill is the same way. What happens is we don't allow that time because we get frustrated with our client or our patient or our athlete, and we don't let the ugliness guide us. Ugliness is just the way that they're interpreting it at that time and their body's understanding of it. Until we myelinate and we groove programs in our brain and our system, going to be. So be patient, let learning take place, then you'll be happy at the end of that.
I love it.
I appreciate that, because the coaches that I have found to be the best, not just from a passion standpoint, but they are also the best students as well. My very first mentor, Mike Boyle, he's notorious for saying, he's great at cheating. And, he's constantly pulling information. And so I very much appreciate that. I appreciate both of your times and your expertise and ultimately your care. So thank you, and we'll continue to seek to make a difference.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.